Hey, seventh hour. Before we dive into all the stuff today, just a reminder that on Wednesday this week we'll have an optional period 8 test. So it can only help your grade, can't hurt you. It's one of our last opportunities though to get points in that test category. It's also using the same format as the AP exam, so I highly recommend you do it. Make sure though that you submit it by the end of the day Wednesday. That's the hard deadline. Okay. If you got questions, please let me know. It pains me to say this though, but this is pretty much our last day of new content. Hopefully, I'll be able to work with the schedule enough to bring in some new things because I really got so much I want to talk about. But as of right now, this might be our last day of new stuff. So this will bring us kind of to the end of period 8. Um, Please, as you're still reading through the textbook, you're going to be getting all that other information. Please, if there's something that intrigues you, you got comments, questions, please let me know. Let's talk about Carter some more today, and not just Carter, but also other issues of the 70s. We had mentioned how Nixon was the first and only president to ever resign from office in the wake of the Watergate scandal, and how his vice president Ford then stepped into the position of president. Now, Ford was unique because he had already had to step into the position of vice president. So he was the only president ever elected without, or made president without receiving any election votes. And we mentioned about how Ford urged it as a time of healing with his pardon of Nixon. Well, we always have reactions, right? In politics and history. So Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, becomes the next elected president, and quite a few things will happen during his time in office. Um, Most notably, probably, if you polled Americans, this is the thing they probably remember the most, is the Iran hostage situation. Now, if you have been following the situation with America and Iran really in your entire lifetimes, you know it is not a good one. America and Iran have had a very contentious relationship, and this dates well before this instance at the American embassy in Iran. And there's actually a really good clip here. So if you open this file up, you can watch it. It's the opening scene of a film called Argo, which kind of walks you through the history of American Iranian relations. And you can kind of see the extent in which America had involved itself with politics of Iran. So what happens here is as a revolution occurs in Iran and America kind of shelters their past leader whom they wanted. The American embassy is sieged, and roughly 50 Americans are actually taken hostage. And this is a huge standoff. Some people are crying for American military intervention immediately. Others want a peaceful resolution. And this goes on and on and on. What this film Argo is actually about is a CIA plan to infiltrate Iran under the disguise of a Canadian film production and to then sneak out some escaped embassy workers as members of the film. So, this is another clip from that movie. It's from the very start of the film, in which the embassy is breached and kind of taken over. So, definitely a good movie. Rated R. So, just heads up there. I believe it might have gotten Best Picture. I could be wrong there, but very good. Spoiler alert, though, after over a year, you have the embassy officials freed by Iran. So no one was killed in this event, but also notice that the headline, they wait to release them till after Carter has already lost his reelection campaign and Ronald Reagan is elected. But we'll talk about him later. Let's keep talking about the 70s. What you see here is oh, that's not the snake, right? It's a spoof on the old Albany Plane of Union from Ben Franklin, the Join or Die. But instead, the colonies we see here is all different members of U.S. energy policy. During the 70s, there's a massive energy crisis coupled by slow down growth of natural gas production in the United States and an oil embargo overseas. This little video here gives you a little more insight into how this devastated America's energy industry during the 70s. A highlight of the Carter presidency, that would be the Camp David Accords. What you see here is Jimmy Carter in the middle, and the leader of Egypt and the leader of Israel, who had been engaged in war and huge disagreements over land ownership. And Carter actually, Camp David is the site in which he kind of sits down these leaders and gets them to agree to maybe not a perfect peace, but at least steps towards a peace. And this was a sign of American global intervention as a positive, right? Like the opposite of using its military and being maybe that good neighbor, right? That so many presidents earlier had tried to promote as an idea. During the 70s, you also have some pretty radical changes in politics. This is a trailer for the film called Milk. It's about a San Francisco man who gets elected to the board of supervisors as the first openly gay politician in American history. And that's a pretty big moment. So that film kind of follows his story. You can watch the trailer for it. But here we go. As we've always seen in history, there's always reactions, right? So we had seen a pretty big period of liberal growth, right? From Johnson's Great Society, even President Nixon, we had seen as, regardless of maybe his Southern strategy, still embracing some elements of kind of this new liberalism in terms of he didn't attack Social Security, this Philadelphia plan, for instance. But the reaction is what we call the new right. So kind of you can picture in your head our political spectrum. The liberals on the left and conservatives on the right. And I like to think of this rise of the new right in kind of three senses: morally, economically, and governmental. Um, Morally, there's a strong element of a conservative Christian, um, seen through televangelists and evangelicals, who kind of latch onto this new right movement, who feel that the moral nature of America is at risk and has been declining. Um, Many members of the new right were concerned about the family structure as far as the divorce rate going up, or even the more open progressive LGBTQ ideas. There's also people who feel that Roe v. Wade is a step in the wrong direction. So there's a strong kind of conservative moral backlash to where America's going. From an economic standpoint, many in the new right are very pro-business. So if you want to think more like Gilded Age philosophy, laissez-faire, that is where their heads are at. That business should be the driving force. They're incredibly anti-communist. That capitalism will be like the great equalizer, almost a social Darwinism perspective again. And governmental, the idea that government has grown too strong, too powerful, too in the lives of everyday Americans. And the epitome of this is truly the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. And boy, oh boy, would I love to talk about more. So I really hope I do have a chance this year to talk more about him. He's in your book, plenty. But Ronald Reagan, in so many ways, is kind of the cornerstone of modern conservatism. He's he's known for huge tax cuts for the wealthy, supply side economics or trickles down economics, Reaganomics as it's called, believing that opening up wealth at the top will trickle to the bottom. He was strongly against communism. It lessened a bit in his second term, but um, ex- massive expenditures for the military, like his Star Wars system, his SDI system, all sorts of pretty radical changes that occurred during his time. Very anti-union. So he's in a lot of ways kind of like the face of the modern day Republican Party to a degree that you might look to maybe the Great Society as the face of the modern day Democratic Party. But we don't really have a lot of time right now to dive into this more. Hopefully, we will later, but for right now, we're going to have that practice test on Wednesday, and then we're going to start doing more targeted review for our AP exam coming up. So I'll talk to you soon.